Welcome to What's the Plan? A grassroots call to action from ICaucus, the Patriot Action Network, the American Grassroots Coalition, Tea Party Nation, and the Americans for Fair Taxation. You know, my uncle's got a perplexing financial problem he's asked the grassroots to help him figure out. So let's take a close look at my uncle's monthly budget and see if you can help. After taxes and deductions, my uncle's monthly take-home pay is $1,812, but his monthly expenses are averaging almost $3,200 every month. Now that results in a shortfall of $1,370, and that's the root of my uncle's problems because he's using credit cards to pay his bills. Now charging over $1,300 a month can really add up, so how much has he run up on his credit cards? Just over $141,000. Now, with a monthly income of less than $2,000 and more than $400 interest accruing every month, how's he ever going to pay that back? But here's a kicker. He's running out of time because those credit cards have limits. And right now, my uncle's going to hit that limit in less than 2 months, at which time his ability to borrow and survive from month to month is going to come to an abrupt and screeching halt. But you better be sitting down right now because that crushing credit card debt, that's not the worst of his problems. See, for several years now, my uncle's been taking money from other family members and friends and promising he would invest it for them in retirement accounts. But he's never invested that money. Instead, he's been building this elaborate house of cards. He's making payments to earlier investors with money from the later investors, and then he's spending the rest of the money. Now, he's got nothing to show for it. Now, stop me if you've heard this before, but even though he spent all that money, he's issuing promissory notes for the full value of those retirement accounts, and people are expecting to cash in on those notes as soon as they retire. So how much has my uncle promised to pay out, but right now can't pay for? Over $1.1 million. That's $1.1 million above the $141,000 in credit with a monthly income of less than $2,000. So okay, Patriots, here's where you come in. Now that you know my uncle's financial situation, what's the plan? What would you tell my uncle do to solve his financial problems? Well, before you answer, you should know that there's a couple plans already on the table. See, my uncle said that after doing some really deep soul searching, he was prepared to dramatically cut his monthly spending by, wait for it, $75 per month. Starting 8 months from now. Now that's not a misprint. It's obvious my uncle doesn't really grasp how deep of a hole he's in. So I told some of his advisors that when you cut $75 per month out of $3,100, that's less than 2.5%. Now his advisors agreed, and they announced that they were going to make my uncle cut his monthly expenses immediately by a full $76.25 per month. Now if cutting only $75 or $76 out of a $1,300 monthly shortfall leaves you scratching your head, you're not alone. I pointed out this plan is going to leave my uncle maxing out his credit cards in less than 2 months. Nothing to worry about, they said, because they had a joint plan to address that problem. They're just going to demand that the credit card companies raise their debt limits so my uncle can keep borrowing money. Problem solved. Well, except for that crushing debt load that keeps expanding. And what's the plan for those staggering promissory notes anyway? Well, that's Joint Plan D, they said. We're just going to say and do nothing about those. Well, America, wouldn't surprise me if you're ready to throw in the towel on my uncle's financial mess, but stick with me for a minute here, because my uncle is your Uncle Sam. And this budget mess we've just gone over is the exact federal budget mess the United States is in if you just add 8 zeros to every number. That's right. Every month, our government collects $181 billion, and they're spending $318 billion, borrowing $137 billion to do so. So for those of you keeping score at home, that's $4.5 billion per day, each and every day they're borrowing. If you want to look at it another way, the government has just borrowed another $11.3 million in just the few minutes since you started watching this video. Our government's now $14.1 trillion in debt. It's going to reach its credit limit of $14.3 trillion in less than 2 months. And the money our government has promised to pay people in the future through Social Security, Medicare, pensions, etc., it's now over $112 trillion. And they don't have a single penny put away to pay for those promises. Now remember my uncle's plan to cut $75 out of his monthly budget starting 8 months from now? If you just add 8 zeros to that, you've got the tough budget cuts that President Obama submitted to Congress on February 14th. It amounts to less than 2.5% of total spending. And remember the advisor's plan to cut $76.25 out of the budget starting right now? Add 8 zeros to that, and what you've got is the $61 billion in immediate spending cuts that Congress voted for at just 4 a.m. this morning that we recorded the video, Saturday, February 19th. Now, the joint plan to demand the credit card companies allow my uncle to keep borrowing money, that's the debt ceiling that the The leadership of both parties is planning on increasing just a couple of weeks from now. Because after all, when you got a flood, why fix the plumbing when you can just raise the ceiling? And you remember those promissory notes that no one's going to address? Well, right now, if we applied every single penny of federal revenues and spent money on nothing else, and if there was no further growth in those unfunded promises, it would take almost 52 years for the government to make good on the promises. But unfortunately, over the past few years, while the government took in $4 trillion in revenue, those unfunded liabilities grew by more than $5.5 trillion, which means those promises are growing faster each and every month than the government takes money in. That means we're never going to be able to make good on those promises. Does it ever feel to you like your government isn't listening to the grassroots movement as they keep playing around with monopoly money? Well, here's some good news. Because President Obama has asked us, the grassroots, for our opinion, and he's challenged us to present a plan. Because 5 months ago, on September 20th, President Obama said our country had a noble tradition of being skeptical about government, but the challenge to the grassroots movements, he said, what he wanted to hear is specifically what we would do to deal with the economic problems. Well, to that end, Mr. President, we have called the 2011 Grassroots Economic Summit. Sponsored by all of our organizations, the Grassroots Economic Summit is a gathering of a few economic policy experts, some newly elected principal congressmen, and everyday activists just like yourself. And the goal is to collectively prepare and deliver a grassroots economic blueprint to the newly elected Congress and to let Congress know we're going to stand behind them as they act to stop the bleeding and fix this financial mess. This summit won't be just a bunch of boring speeches, but rather it's going to be a town hall style meeting with a let's roll up our sleeves and talk format to get your input and let's figure out what's the plan. Now, we've invited Peter Schiff as our featured expert, invited him to come explain how he was able to correctly forecast the credit crunch, the collapse of the housing market, and the rise of the emerging markets. He's going to offer concrete policies that are going to put the U.S. back on the road to competitiveness and prosperity. In addition to Peter Schiff, Congressman Jason Chaffetz and other federal and state representatives are going to be there to make sure our message gets taken back to and represented to Washington instead of the other way around. We've got other invited experts who are going to be leading financial roundtable discussions on solutions for reining in the unauthorized expansion of federal government, solutions for pension and Medicare reform, solution for the unintended effects of government regulations on foreign policy, solutions to intrusive government interference in education, true taxation solutions for spurring job creation and economic growth, examining the rights and powers and duties of our state legislatures to protect us from an unconstitutional federal actions, solutions to the intrusive government interference in energy and land management, and grassroots solutions to effectively reach minority voters. And members of the Independence Caucus education team are going to put the spotlight on true solutions for debt reduction and federal deficits. Because you see, the media and status quo in Washington have framed our budget problems as a series of false choices. They say we either have to raise taxes, or we're going to leave Americans impoverished by draconian budget cuts, or we have to default on our obligations, or we have to raise the debt ceiling and keep borrowing money, or we've got to ease the problems and monetize the debt with quantitative easing, aka print money. Well, the Independence Caucus and all of our co-sponsors rejects all of those false choices. And our session is going to focus on a real choice, the fixed pie budget plan. It's a comprehensive strategy to eliminate deficits and debt by eliminating the systemic problems that they built into the federal process back in 1974. And these systemic solutions are based on the writings of James Madison. They can be implemented immediately. You don't need to wait for a balanced budget amendment. If there was ever a time we needed the wisdom of a James Madison, it's right now. So this is it. This is the time for the Grassroots Economic Summit, and we need you. All of our organizations collectively extend an invitation and a call to action to you. Will you please join us? We need your input. And you can attend and participate in person in Utah on February 26th, or from your own home you can participate through an online webinar, and you'll get a DVD of the entire proceedings in case you miss any part of it during the day. For complete information and to register for the Grassroots Economic Summit, just go to tinyurl.com/WeCount, because we do count. That's why we need you there. And on behalf of all of our organizations, we thank you for your time. We thank you in advance for joining us there and bringing your input to the table at the Economic Summit. We'll see you there.